Quite a few of you have wanted a look at this show, which isn't too much of a surprise. And well, hey, why not? So far the vids on here have tried to cover a wide range of Puro, not just the classics and the big heavyweight battles, but also some legendary Joshi moments, a bit of shoot style, a snifter of comedy. It's about time we had something junior related, and these days, Michinoku Pro Wrestling's big show to commemorate their 3rd anniversary is as good a candidate as any. These guys ended up being the flag bearers for the speedy, devil-may-care cruiserweight style. The 1990s may have been full of magnificent junior heavies, whether they were from New Japan or FMW, or if they were homegrown or coming in from the West, but a huge chunk of the guys on the top level came from Michinoku. What's also important is that Michinoku set up an identity that existed outside of Tokyo, the place that just about every other pro-res promotion had called home. Hell, a lot of people probably thought that you couldn't possibly set up a promotion outside of the capital until Michinoku started running out of Iwate Prefecture, making their way gradually down from the north of Japan over several years of excellent wrestling and the buzz they obtained. In many ways, these days is where it all culminates. Commercially speaking, it was the highlight of what was an utterly fantastic year for Michinoku Pro, being their biggest show to date, indeed the biggest show that they have ever run, and taking place in the capital at the world famous Sumo Hall in front of nearly 8,000 people. It is, well, it's a pretty good show. If you were to look at the card as a whole, you'd see highlights and lowlights, which we will get to. It's not much of a spoiler to say that it's a thoroughly decent watch. It's a show that both looks back through the past of junior wrestling and points to its future, one with a very wide range of styles on display, including stuff you probably wouldn't expect to see at all. While there is one phenomenal match on this card that tends to get all the attention, a groundbreaking 10-man tag match that stunned viewers far and wide and got the 5 stars from Big Man Melts, these days was a high-profile platform for other styles to be showcased too, whether it was classic World of Sport style British wrestling, or hybrid promotions that existed in a niche within a niche. As far as 1996 goes, it must be one of the smarkiest shows out there. A show that was put together by serious wrestling nerds who wanted to highlight the weird stuff that they loved, getting the chance to do it in one of the most fabled and most traditional of wrestling arenas. Going through it all in detail will certainly be a ton of fun, but first we should quickly look at just how an independent company formed by young wrestlers that splintered off from another fed and started off running in prefectures like Iwate and Amori made their way to this hallowed hall. Michinoku Pro certainly wasn't the first promotion to primarily be based around junior wrestling. Indeed, it splintered off from another one that was built around the juniors. Indeed, one that was based around Lucha Libre, that being Gran Hamada's Universal Pro Wrestling or Federación Universal de Lucha Libre. Usually this promotion's known as Universal Lucha Libre. Hamada was a New Japan dojo trainee who'd found a lot of his style and passion for the craft of lucha when he was on excursion in Mexico, wrestling for the Naucalpan-based UWA. He became highly proficient in the lucha style and was thoroughly welcomed by fans over there. On his return, however, Hamada found that his style didn't quite fit in with various promotions. He was in the original UWF, but his style didn't match up with the more realistic vision of wrestling that Akira Maeda and Satoru Sayama were pushing. He went to All Japan, but, well, options for the smaller wrestler in Bubba's company were, as usual, thoroughly limited. Eventually, Hamada decided that if he couldn't make his hybrid style of a Puro foundation mixed with the fast and acrobatic mat work of lucha, something often known as lucha-s, work in an established promotion, he would have to build a promotion himself for it, and in 1990 that's what he did, with help on the business side from Hisashi Shinma Jr., son of the former New Japan CEO, and Kenji Yonekura, a successful former boxer, trainer, and promoter. Universal Lucha Libre's life was all too brief, but there's a pretty decent amount of quality material to be found from it. It is certainly something different. Now, there had been room in the past for top lucha stars in the big companies, Mil Mascaras in 1970s All Japan being without question the highest profile example, but Hamada would create a roster that was chock full of not just any old guys in masks, but the very best and most successful luchadors around. Negro Casas, El Hijo del Santo, Pero Aguayo, Los Brazos, Solar One, El Texano, Dr. Wagner Jr. Certainly early on, the shows were stacked, and it's sure worth looking at if you love Lucha Libre, which of course you should do. There was more than just Lee's Imports, mind you. Universal was one of the only companies in Japan to run a mixed card, with at least one match per show being devoted to top Joshi talent. And then you had the homegrown talent. Obviously this includes Hamada himself, but also a lot of young wrestlers that he'd trained filling out the undercard. Some of these names will become more familiar later on, but these wrestlers currently worked under names such as Mongolian Yuga, Masa Michinoku, Sakigake Gantetsu, and Monkey Magic Wakita. And then there was Hamada's primo pupil, the homegrown guy with the biggest buzz, someone who'd washed out of New Japan's dojo due to size, but then made his name in Mexico and was taken under Hamada's wing. Yoshihiro Asai, a man who would absolutely start wowing the fledgling promotion's crowds in 1990 and 1991, one of the quickest, most acrobatic and flat-out best out there. A surefire company ace if ever there was one. In the main, a lot of the buzz surrounding Hamada's promotion came from Asai's performances. Even this early on, he was getting plenty of inches as someone to seriously watch, not just in the Japanese magazines, but in the Western sheets. One particular June 1990 match against the legendary Negro Casas is an essential watch, a great main event on a particularly packed out card. Asai was crucial to the company's initial success, but then, well, he was lured away. In a move very much driven by EMLL's then head booker, Antonio Pena, Asai was signed up by Mexico's top Lucha Libre promotion, in a move that also made Asai available to Genichiro Tenryu's SWS as part of a talent share. Simply put, EMLL were offering Asai a hell of a lot of money, far more than Hamada or Universal Lucha Libre could possibly afford. Yoshihiro Asai's departure to EMLL sees him take on the identity for which he is most famous, that of Ultimo Dragon. And for Universal, well, it's a crushing blow that will pretty much prove fatal. The one-away breakout success of Asai was a blessing, but almost a curse. If anything, it happened way too fast. They created a big star and lost him within the space of about a year, with virtually no time to even start thinking about building up any of the other younger talents that we've mentioned. It's a bitter pill to swallow. With Asai gone, the shine gradually came off of Universal through 1992. Some of the younger wrestlers started to make it higher up the card, but the company went into an inexorable decline. By the end of the year, a significant group of these home talents, led by Masa Michinoku, real name Masanori Murakawa, get somewhat fed up with the state of the company, and after a political fallout with Hamada, they decide to break off from the promotion, essentially dealing it a final death blow. Murakawa decides that he's going to go away from the usual home of wrestling promotions in Tokyo. Instead, he's going to operate out of the city of Takizawa, part of Iwate Prefecture in northeast Japan, naming the new company after the ancient name for the region of Tohoku that comprises this part of the country, Michinoku. And while he may be known to his family as Masanori Murakawa, well, from this point on you can call him the Great Sasuke. The new promotion, Michinoku Pro Wrestling, were actually able to hit the ground running somewhat. They generated a decent amount of buzz even before their first shows in 1993. The story of a new wrestling promotion that was independently run, operating outside the normal realms of Tokyo, was actually one that resonated with the press, giving Sasuke's outfit a fair amount of press inches and TV time, perhaps because it was something of an antithesis to more glitzy outfits like, say, Tenryu's SWS, that had a hell of a lot more money behind them and ended up failing. It also helped that they were running with a community focus in markets that generally didn't see much wrestling. The big two, All Japan and New Japan, generally only came to somewhere like Iwate Prefecture a couple of times each year, and a lot of other promotions like, say, All Japan Women or UWFI would hardly bother going there at all. And so Michinoku were quickly able to get a big following all over the northeast in prefectures like Iwate, Omori and Miyagi. It wasn't long at all before they could attract as much as a couple of thousand for their big shows, while also putting in the grind in much smaller venues with a couple of hundred or so. Initial buzz is one thing, of course, but a quality product is needed to last. Happily, Michinoku Pro could certainly provide that. While the first couple of tours would be bolstered by high-quality lucha talent like Levianos, M-Pro quickly focused on their homegrown talent. And geez, what talent it was. Gran Hamada's trainees included the likes of Sato, JINSEI Shinzaki, Taka Michinoku, Super Delphin, Terry Boy, Shiryu, a group of highly skilled wrestlers, all of whom were young, athletic and hungry. Some were more versed in the high-flying styles, particularly Taka Michinoku and Great Sasuke himself, while others like Sato and Shinzaki could definitely hold it down on the power end. Michinoku were producing some excellent work right from the off, and it would only get better over the next couple of years. And this buzz meant that when Michinoku representatives worked with other companies, they ended up getting treated as big deals, and generally, this meant the Great Sasuke. In 1993 and 1994, Sasuke and other representatives would go all over Japan, collaborating with other companies and spreading the good junior word. They worked quite a lot with FMW in 93 and 94, there were a few shows with Genichiro Tenryu's War, even a multi-man on an all-Japan women's show, but still the most famous of these excursions was Sasuke's time in New Japan. Sasuke's first appearance in New Japan was on April 16, 1994, the night of the first Super J Cup, and it would be one of the most famous nights of his career, defeating El Samurai and Jushin Thunder Liger in two absolute classics before losing in the final to some Canadian guy in a match that I'm sure was thought of as a classic once. Michinoku would also be a part of the annual Best of the Super Juniors tournament, where Super Delphin also made it all the way to the final, eventually coming out second best against Liger. These collaborations, while also including the odd bit of weirdness here and there, helped increase the profile of Michinoku greatly, and their excellent product would help them convert that interest into more followers. Around the end of 94, Sato, Terry Boy and Shiryu started a heel stable, the one that would really take Empro into the stratosphere. Kai and Tai ran roughshod over the company's faces, bullying the likes of Masato Yakashiji, who we're going to see a lot more of, sneak attacking the big names, and generally carrying themselves like an arrogant gang of arseholes. Sato and Terry Boy would change their names to Dick Togo and Men's Teo respectively, and they would quickly become a powerful force, one that could take on the faces in some seriously compelling bouts. While there's lots of fine singles action to be found in the company, generally speaking, when people think of M-Pro, the multi-man bouts featuring Kai and Tai are the first thing that springs to mind. They started off excellent, and again, well, they'd just keep getting better. The roster would get another boost in 1995 with the return of Gran Hamada, the man without whom none of this would have been possible, while Kai and Tai's dominance increases yet further when the Dream Chasers tag team of Taka Michinoku and Shuichi Funaki join up with them in the spring of 96, creating the even stronger Kai and Tai Deluxe, or Kai and Tai DX. All throughout this period, Michinoku Pro are doing things that basically no one else is doing. They're mixing up the junior style and lucha in ways that even Universal didn't dare go to, proudly shouting about the art of luchaism, and running masked league tournaments where even guys who didn't usually wear a mask would don one specifically to participate. If you were into the old tape trading and the like, you most certainly wanted this stuff in your life. And after their third anniversary, well, there would be a whole load more people who wanted a taste of what M-Pro were offering. International companies soon started sniffing around Michinoku Pro and some of their wrestlers due to the hype that they were generating, although they were largely able to keep their main guys together for the first couple of years, one exception being JINSEI Shinzaki. Shinzaki wrestled a tour for the WWF in May of 94, impressive enough that he was offered a contract later in the year when Titan Towers decided that they needed a Japanese wrestler on the roster. Their first choice was FMW's Hayabusa, but they went to Shinzaki after the Phoenix turned WWF down. Shinzaki spent about 18 months or so in the Fed as the mysterious Hakushi, not actually too far from the silent and spiritual gimmick that he played in Michinoku, especially considering that this is new generation era WWF we're talking about, with a couple of highlights such as a feud with Bret Hart, but after what was largely a stint in the mid-card, he decided to part ways with Vince and company in March of 96, spending a little while in New Japan before landing back in Michinoku just in time for the third anniversary show, where he would make his official return by main eventing against the aforementioned Hayabusa. This third anniversary show was announced in the summer to take place at the historic Sumo Hall on October the 10th, and SHINZAKI vs Hayabusa wasn't the initial plan for the main event. You might have thought that would have been Great Sasuke. And indeed, it was. As reported at the time, the initial plan was for Sasuke to headline against a legend of junior wrestling, that being the Dynamite Kid. Sasuke, around this time, became something of a belt collector. In August of 1996, 8 historical junior titles held by 8 top current juniors were unified into one mega championship called the J-Crown by New Japan, and Sasuke won the inaugural tournament for it, defeating Ultimo Dragon in the final. However, during the match, a dive to the outside went badly wrong, and Sasuke cracked his frickin' skull. He still finished the bout, but his participation in his own company's biggest show to date was in question for quite a while. In the end, he would still feature, although the match wouldn't be a singles bout against Dynamite Kid. The match, which was still promoted as the top attraction of the card, would see Sasuke teaming up with Mil Mascaras and Satoru Sayama, the original Tiger Mask, against Dynamite, Mascaras' equally legendary brother Dos Caras, and Kuniaki Kobayashi. A 6-man tag absolutely chock full of history, with Sayama and Dynamite Kid sharing a ring for the first time since 1983, and it being the first time that the two brothers, Mascaras and Caras, had been on opposing sides, as far as anybody knew. With respect to the age and conditioning of some of the wrestlers involved, not to mention Sasuke's injury, this bout would not close out the card, but it would certainly take place, which does feel like something of a miracle considering the characters and egos of some of the people involved in it. Naturally, Kai and Tai DX are going to be a big part of the card. The recent increase of their numbers to 5 sets the scene for a 10-man tag bout that expands even further on the awesome multi-man matches they've put on over the past couple of years, where the whole quintet are going against the best of Michinoku Pro's face army: Gran Hamada, Super Delphin, Tiger Mask 4, Gran Naniwa, and Masato Yakashiji. This is the future portion of the card. All of these wrestlers have been trained by either Hamada or Sasuke, including the latest incarnation of the Immortal Tiger, Yoshihiro Yamazaki, who picked up the gimmick in 1995 for Michinoku Pro with Satoru Sayama's full endorsement, and continues to wear the mask to this day. The legendary British wrestler Johnny Saint is on the card. He's been touring in Michinoku Pro since July, and tonight he will defend his British light heavyweight title against Naohiro Hoshikawa in what has been billed as Saint's retirement match. Battle Arts, a new promotion that's best described as a hybrid of shoot style and traditional pro wrestling that formed from the ashes of Fujiwara Gumi last year, will be featured in a tag bout: Daisuke Aikida and Satoshi Yoneyama against Yuki Ishikawa and Alexander Otsuka. And finally, Wellington Wilkins, a popular American wrestler who is largely in the mid-card, will defend his PWA heavyweight title against a young rookie by the name of Lenny Lane, in what must be the strangest pairing on this major card. And with that rundown, we are about set to go through the show in detail. So, let's head to the ring. I'll have more detail on the wrestlers and so on as we go through each match. Before the first match begins, we get a little bit of comedy with Wellington Wilkins, a man in a suit who might possibly be Yone Genjin, but I'm admittedly not sure, and Santa Claus. A fan catches a cushion that Wellington throws into the crowd, this is Sumo Hall after all, and wins a prize from Santa that's marked as a case of brandy, but turns out to be a toy snake, which Wilkins naturally whips around in Jake the Snake fashion, scaring everybody else off. Silly little thing before the fun starts with our first match. Johnny Saint, an undisputed legend of classic British wrestling, will be defending the light heavyweight title he's held for 3 years against Naohiro Hoshikawa, a wrestler in his 3rd year who got his start right here in Empro. Johnny Saint has been wrestling since the late 50s, can work people on the mat like virtually no other, and tonight is billed as his final match. As mentioned earlier, he's actually been touring with Michinoku since July. As this match is for the British title, it's going to be contested under British-style rules: 5-minute rounds and 1 fall. As with a lot of the undercard bouts on this show, we only get clipped highlights of what occurred, which is a little bit of a shame, but in the main this is basically an exhibition for Johnny Saint and his supreme mat work. Hoshikawa, a highly underrated wrestler who never quite managed to get the roses he deserved, is a very good dance partner for him, more than capable of working along with him. No mean feat because even at the age of 55, Saint is still ludicrously fast and fluid, performing escapes and reversals that almost feel like sleight of hand and are indeed described as magic by the commentators. Hoshikawa does almost end up in an advantageous position a couple of times, even ready to execute a submission only to be stopped by the round bell, something which earns a nod of respect from Saint. Hoshikawa gets a bit more intense with the strikes as the match goes on, but soon enough Saint is able to work his genius and find a way to get the advantage again. We do indeed see the fabled Lady of the Lake. He gets bewildered by it and nearly pinned. Eventually, in the fourth round, Johnny takes advantage with a full post-in, Hoshikawa runs into a brainbuster, and Saint gets the victory after 2 minutes and 3 seconds of the fourth, hands being held up in respect afterwards after a thoroughly good-natured contest. It is quite an interesting bout, this one, I think. Even if it is only the opening match of the card, and it is essentially a glorified exhibition, I do believe it is actually quite important. When we get to the big match of this card, we are going to talk about how the 10-man tag was a gateway for so many into M-Pro style, but on a smaller scale I think this bout might have done the same for classic British wrestling, the world of sport type stuff, a rare showcase outside of the country for wrestling beyond the likes of Big Daddy and whatnot. Quite a few American wrestlers have spoken of being influenced by British wrestling, particularly the likes of Chris Hero. And I wonder if this match had a little bit to do with that, showing a wholly different take on mat work that admittedly some don't find particularly realistic, but is certainly exciting and highly intricate. Johnny Saint didn't wrestle another recorded match for 11 years after this bout, but a return match in LDN against contemporary rival Johnny Kidd would lead to him competing a bit more often, including in Ishikawa, where he was received like a god, as well as a match in IPW where the aforementioned Chris Hero finally got to tussle with his inspiration. And while Saint could still go at the age of 55 here, yeah, he could still go exactly the same at the age of 67 and beyond, still in the absolute peak of conditioning. Johnny wrestled his last match in 2015 and he is still listed as the general manager of WWE's NXT UK, even if that's now discontinued. Hoshikawa was also an excellent talent, a very well-rounded and intense junior who has a lot of brilliant matches worth checking out under his belt, particularly his bouts in early 2001 with the likes of Naomichi Marufuji and Tatsuhito Takaiwa. Unfortunately, he suffered a terrible brain injury in a 2004 match with Takaiwa, putting a premature end to his career. He was wonderful to watch, and it's a shame that he never got the chance to reach his full potential. Our next match features Wellington Wilkins, who appeared on the comedy segment earlier on the show. He's defending his Pro Wrestling America Heavyweight Championship, a belt he'd won recently from someone called The Hater, and he's doing so against Lenny Lane, of all people. Michinoku Pro can be quite random sometimes. Wilkins is a rather intriguing if not well-known wrestler, an American who worked as a jobber for both the NWA and WWF in the late 80s, then went to Japan and competed in shoot-style promotions like the UWF and Fujiwara Gumi, and learning his craft in submissions, before ending up working for Michinoku and embracing a fair bit of lucha. And Lenny Lane is... well, there's not too much to say so far because he's pretty new, not even 2 years into his career. Why is he here? Well, he is a part of the aforementioned Pro Wrestling America, a Minneapolis-based indie run by elite-level trainer Eddie Sharkey. Sharkey's best pupils include folks like Rick Rude, the Road Warriors, Bob Backlund, Jerry Lynn and Sean Waltman, and Lane is one of his students. There's not a huge amount to say about this match, really. Mostly it's a showcase for Wilkins, performing power moves and the like. Lenny Lane does get some offence in. We get a flying clothesline and a tombstone piledriver, but when Lane goes for a second one, he ends up getting reversed and tombstoned himself. The finish is a bit annoying from an editing point of view. Wilkins hits a flying clothesline, but just as it seems like the match is building up a little, we smash cut direct to the finish. Wilkins locks in a knee bar and Lane submits immediately. We get to see about 5 minutes of a match that went around 10. After the match, the guy with the suit and briefcase hands Wilkins his title, but then suddenly goes on the attack, blindsiding Wilkins with the case. He gets a few more shots in, but Wilkins is eventually able to recover and hits the guy, who again I presume to be Yone Genjin, with a jackknife powerbomb to clear him out. On the whole, yeah, not a whole lot to talk about here. An average little undercard match. Not terrible, but not memorable either. Wellington Wilkins spent the next few years mostly in Michinoku Pro, although he's not recorded as wrestling since 2003 on Cage Match. One presumes he's long retired, although he did have a WWF match in '98, a dark one where he defeated the Executioner, played by Uber jobber Dwayne Gill. Lenny Lane hadn't done much in his career so far. At this stage you probably couldn't even call him a Chris Jericho that you'd ordered from Wish, which is what people often called him back in the day. He is of course most famous for his West Hollywood Blondes team with former Ravens Flock member Lodi in late 90s WCW, and after that it's a short time in TNA, a couple of jobbing appearances in WWF, and mostly American Indies, before he largely retired in 2013. Next up is the Battle Arts Showcase, a tag match with 4 guys from the relatively new promotion set up from the ashes of Yoshiaki Fujiwara's shoot-style fed, Fujiwara Gumi. What's cool about this, of course, is the chance to talk a little about Battle Arts. This is the sort of highly niche promotion that gets championed by folks like the Pro Wrestling Only board and the late great Dean Rasmussen, and you should absolutely listen to them, because Battle Arts was awesome. To just call it another shoot-style promotion would be underselling it. It's this weird mix of shoot-style with stiff strikes and technical submissions, but it also treats the style of pro wrestling like it's as legitimate as any other martial art, if that makes sense. And the variation and quality of their work? Frankly, utterly brilliant. 3 of the 4 guys in this match are absolute golden operators, the sort of people where you see them work a couple of times and from there you want to try and find everything you can with them in it. Yuki Ishikawa himself is the main founder of Battle Arts, Daisuke Aikida is one of the company's heavier guys, Alexander Otsuka is an amateur wrestler who defines the Fed's mix of traditional Puro with shoot style, and Satoshi Yoneyama is the least accomplished of this quartet, but still very decent. This tag bout will be held under Bati rules, no pinfalls, with victory only by knockout or submission. There's a definite style to both of these teams. Yoneyama and Aikida are both pretty well versed in striking, especially Aikida, and they quickly batter the other team with their kicks. Otsuka is, well, an unreal and underrated talent. Great at suplexes, submissions and the like, but a phenomenal seller and face in peril too. Otsuka eventually overcomes the opening salvos to hit a backdrop and try for a Kimura, but Aikida's roughhousing allows for the first interactions in this match between him and Yuki Ishikawa. Ishikawa and Aikida are, well, they're the main rivals here. Hell, both of their careers are virtually defined by going against each other in Battle Arts and various other promotions, in phenomenal and shockingly stiff matches. Otsuka slams Aikida out of a sub-attempt, but continues to be isolated and set upon, but then a picture-perfect German on Yoneyama finally brings Ishikawa in. Aikida nearly gets the knockout with a huge roundhouse, but Ishikawa is able to catch the leg on the next attempt, dragon screw, and nearly get the submission with a leg lock. Yoneyama also nearly gets caught with a leg lock and very nearly taps. Ishikawa holds on despite being bloody soccer kicked by Aikida, who then gets another beautiful German from Otsuka. Ishikawa hits a German of his own, Otsuka hits his favoured dragon suplex, and then corners Aikida while Ishikawa secures an armbar on Yoneyama for the victory. Again, we only see about half of what was a 16-minute match, but what's here is an absolute load of fun, and definitely the best action on the card so far. The new promotion's got off to a fine start here with this great little showcase. As mentioned, Yuki Ishikawa is the main man behind Battle Arts, the one constant for the Federation's first and second periods. Well versed in submissions and tough as all hell, he's also done lots of freelancing outside of Battle Arts in near enough every promotion you care to name. He did a couple of MMA bouts, and he'll still occasionally get in the ring to this day, sometimes still against his eternal rival, Daisuke Aikida. Aikida also did a lot of freelancing outside of battle arts. After the Federation's first period ended in 2001, he was largely in Noah, where he was typically great, especially in his feud with Takeshi Morishima. He also set up his own battle arts-esque promotion called Futen. This is where, in 2005, Ishikawa and Aikida would have arguably their greatest ever meeting, and most certainly their stiffest, which is saying a hell of a lot. Futen closed its doors in 2013, but Aikida, like Ishikawa, is still an active wrestler. Alexander Otsuka, the man they call a Diet Butcher, is another freelancer who has hung his hat damn near everywhere, and yeah, as you can probably tell, I bloody well love the guy. He's also well known for his MMA career, with a lot of matches in Pride. He would often lose said matches, but he was known for his toughness, and his fights were always entertaining. Once again, he is still an active pro wrestler. Finally, Satoshi Yoneyama has also had a long career. After the end of Battle Arts' first period, he moved to Noah, where he remains to this day. He grew his hair out into a big afro, and you might know him better as Muhammad Yone. If there is just one thing you should take from this whole section, it's pretty straightforward. Go and watch Battle Arts. So, the next match is the Big Legends 6-man tag, one of the main attractions on this card. The 6 players here don't exactly need much introducing, but we've got 2 of history's most popular luchadors in the shape of Mil Mascaras and Dos Caras, who are also brothers. They normally teamed together, but they're on opposing sides for what may well have been the first time. Satoru Sayama, the first Tiger Mask, is also here. Having taken 8 years out to run the early MMA promotion Shuto, he's recently left and is now doing more wrestling, including donning the mask that made him famous. Kuniaki Kobayashi was one of the most successful juniors of the 1980s, mostly in New Japan, and was also a frequent Tiger Mask opponent. Mind you, that was actually Tiger Mask 2, aka Mitsuharu Misawa, in All Japan. Great Sasuke, Michinoku Pro's founder, is wrestling here because it was the best spot seeing as he was recovering from cracking his bloody skull a couple of months ago. Still, he is sure to come out with all of his belts on display, which is pretty damn cool. But of all the people here, the crowd absolutely has the most interest in seeing the Dynamite Kid, Tom Billington. It's the first time he's been in a ring with Sayama since 1983, and he hasn't exactly been a full-time wrestler since 1991. The crowd does absolutely roar for him when he comes out, although there is no way around the fact that he looks pretty awful. That's what years of abuse does to you, I guess. Mil Mascaras falls flat on his arse when he tries to vault into the ring, but laughs it off and gets it right the second time. The crowd have a laugh too, and the general mood here is pretty light, with people just happy to see these guys again. So this match is, once again, primarily an exhibition of sorts, and it's also cut to ribbons in this VHS version. There are some who might say that's not exactly a bad thing, although it is rather irritating to me. Poor old Kuniaki Kobayashi literally gets all his ring time cut from this version of the match. We start with Dynamite and Sayama going at it, running through a bit of the old mat work before Dino shows some off against Sasuke, and then we cut straight to the 2 brothers, Mascaras and Caras, facing off. The 2 run through a couple of neat lucha arm drags and what have you, before Mascaras gets the chance to hit his signature flying cross chop, forcing Caras to tag out to Dino. Dino does hit his signature snap suplex to Sasuke on the floor, and before long we cut to Caras putting a scorpion deathlock onto Sasuke. Caras largely controls Sasuke, hitting a pretty nice pescado when Sasuke tries to retreat to the floor. We cut again, this time to Tiger Mask landing kicks on Dynamite and hitting a DDT, and then we cut yet again to Sasuke and Caras, with Caras again in control after a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker. Kinda confusing all this. My bet is that it's to do with Kuniaki Kobayashi still wrestling full-time for New Japan, actually. Sasuke dropkicks Caras out, and of course, he does perform his big old somersault plancher, the same move that he cracked his skull on. In case you didn't know, Sasuke is completely knucking futs. Cutting again to Mascaras and Caras, we get another cross chop, but Caras evades a shoulder tackle and Mascaras hits Sasuke. This just about gets us to the finish. Dino comes in and hits his cradle tombstone, and Dos Caras finishes Sasuke off with a sit-out powerbomb for the win. The match went 15 minutes 30, and once again we got to see around half of it. Karas seems to make a bit of a challenge following his win, and he will actually return to M-Pro next year, and the losing team commiserate in the back. Once again, well, this is mostly an exhibition. Obviously these guys aren't exactly as speedy as they were in their prime or anything, and the match is cut quite a lot, but what we see is enough for the crowd to be entertained, and it was probably the right decision to put this match in the middle of the card rather than finishing with it. That would have probably been bad. While I can't speak for Kobayashi, seeing as he didn't get shown, everyone mostly held up their end in the match, and this includes Dynamite Kid, despite him being virtually unrecognisable. Hardly an essential watch in the slightest, but it was clearly a lot of fun for the people watching. They enjoyed it. As for the folks in this match, well, most of them were still quite active at this point. Obviously Sasuke was, but seeing as he's the boss of this whole shebang, we'll get to him more later. Mil Mascaras, famously one of the biggest egos in the whole business, would continue to make appearances in Mexico, the US and Japan all the way up to 2019, when he finally retired at the age of 76. One of his most famous and hilarious appearances was at the 1997 Royal Rumble, where Mascaras' ego was so large he wouldn't be eliminated by anyone, instead opting to eliminate himself by diving from the top rope onto Pierre Jr. Just Mascaras fins, you know. His younger brother Dos Caras had his final match to date in 2020, Sayama's last match was in 2016, and Kobayashi's was in 2017. While there's obviously lots more to say about all of these guys and their careers, by this stage they are almost definitely on the Glory Days tour, and had plenty more years of that to go. Not one with that. And as for Dynamite Kid, well, this would end up being his last match. He had a seizure at the airport the following day and lost the use of his left leg the next year. Due to a multitude of health issues, he passed on his 60th birthday in 2018. He does, of course, have a mixed legacy. Again though, that's all a subject for another day. Get a couple of silly little fins before the next match. Probably the funniest of all the comedy sections is when the classic Antonio Inoki music starts blaring out through Sumo Hall, and who should come out but, well, a very small man doing an impersonation of Antonio Inoki, complete with all the classic Inoki catchphrases. This Japanese Jason sensation pops the crowd with some big fist bumps and shouts of "Ikuzo" before leaving with Inoki Bombaye blasting out once again. After that we get a little section with the Great Zebra, played by the 6'7" Shunji Takano, and his entourage. He says a few things, and then decides to take a couple of the ladies under his limb-like arms back to the dressing room with him. It's all a little interval before the next match, which is, well, it's the big one. The semi-main is the 10-man tag bout. The 5 members of Kaintai Deluxe take on 5 of the best in the company's face army, led by Gran Hamada, the guy who trained most of the people in this ring. If the previous match was a celebration of the past, this is where the future lies. And if it wasn't for this match then, well, we probably wouldn't be covering this show at all. While it wouldn't be totally fair to say that these days is a one-match show, it's a perfectly fine watch all the way through. Yeah, this is the bout that got the people talking. This is the one that was rated 5 stars by Dave Meltzer in The Observer and became a huge breakthrough for the Michinoku Pro group, for the Lucha-esque style, and for the wrestlers that were involved. One of the most influential junior matches there has ever been, one that you can still find traces of in the style today. You can't exactly undersell this. Multi-man matches like this one, and damn good ones too, have been a part of M-Pro since the beginning, when they wrestled in Iwate dojos in front of a couple of hundred die-hard followers. Now it's here in one of pro wrestlers, and indeed Japanese sports' most historic venues. You don't exactly doubt that these guys can deliver fully. So the thing with this match is that fins happen so quickly, with so many people going in and out over the course of a 30+ minute bout, that it would be kind of silly to try and go through fins move by move. We would be here for quite some time. Instead, let's try and get a general feel for what's going on. All 10 people in this match have their own roles to play, of course. You've got your burlier folks and your speedy guys and all of that, but damn near everyone's an all-rounder really. While someone like Taka Michinoku was one of the most athletic people around in 1996, that doesn't mean you won't see aerial assaults from guys like Dick Togo, Men's Teo and Guan Naniwa. If there's one person who very much stands out as a specialist, Well, that would probably be Masato Yakashiji. For Michinoku Pro diehards, Yakashiji is the ultimate underdog. He's pretty small even for a junior wrestler, he's quite often the guy who takes the brunt of the offense, and he is phenomenal at selling it while also timing those comebacks to a T. Yakashiji isn't that well known outside of Empro circles, but for those guys, well, he's the Japanese Ricky Morton. There are some differences with this match and some of the other multi-men bouts the company had run previously. With this being quite a long match, there is a fair bit of anticipation, a teasing of the big dives that are surely going to come, a slight slow burn before the action really goes into full tilt. Still, there's not a lot of it. From beginning to end, this is some quick stuff, faster than anything else around. The lucha tag rules kind of help here. People kind of come and go to the ring whenever they want, or whenever someone goes to the floor, which keeps the action constant. But my word, you really see it when Kai and Tai come together for the perfectly coordinated multi-man offense they do. It's so damn smooth, almost like they're running a training drill. They're that flawless and arrogant with it. This is the advantage that Kai and Tai tend to have over their opponents. Given the chance, they can perform these highly intricate 5-man strings of offense, and they can do it with ease. It's like you don't know where to look next because another one's coming. Utterly beautiful to watch. And of course they have their famous poses, where the group will happily play to the crowd, usually while standing on the propped up backs of their opponents. If you're only familiar with guys like Taka, Funaki or Shiryu through their work in WWF and WCW, then, well, this match and Empro in particular is going to have a lot of surprises for you. So what we have here is certainly intricate and technically dazzling, but there is a story to it as well, a sense of character that really helps things along. Kai and Tai are so good in their role as these arrogant bullies, while guys like Yakashiji and Naniwa are excellent as their victims. The heel group will certainly do whatever it takes to win, even attempting to rip off the iconic Tiger's mask, while Hamada, an incredible addition to these matches from the moment he returned, is more than happy to beat up his rogue students. Super Delfin is also just phenomenal in this match. He executes and gets the crowd going so beautifully that sometimes you wonder if he could have ended up becoming as big a deal as the likes of a Jushin Liger even. It does, of course, all build up to a huge crescendo, with the most intricate sequences and biggest dives defining the final third of the match. Taka Michinoku's rapid-fire Asai moonsault in particular is one of the most beautiful aerial moves that there has ever been. Of course, after over 30 minutes of action, all good things have to come to an end. The final 5 minutes is a heart-in-the-mouth sequence of near falls and last-ditch pinfall breakups as chaos reigns. Taka almost gets pinned by Delfin following 2 tornado DDTs and the signature Delfin clutch pinning hold, only for Togo to intervene. Togo misses a lariat and Delfin hits the Delfin special suplex, but Teo's there to stop it. The face team almost look like they're going to get it, with Hamada nailing Teo with a DDT from the apron, but for just a few seconds the chaos becomes so much that the referee struggles to follow it, and that proves crucial. As Delfin readies a tiger suplex on Togo, the big leader of the group commits a foul. With Delfin poleaxed, Togo hits him with a powerbomb, followed by his huge finishing senton bomb, one of the most powerful aerial moves of them all. It gets the 3 count, ending a Stone Cold classic with the heels coming out on top, at least on this night. We'll leave the where are they nows to one side for the moment because, well, there's a lot to unpack here. This match quickly became a must-see for the big wrestling fan. It turned heads the world over, especially when it got the old 5 stars. The influence of this match is huge. You can find a lot of future wrestlers and future company owners, guys like Excalibur for example, commenting on how important this match was to them, and you can trace a line from this all the way to the best high-speed, high-intensity wrestling of today. Now of course, a lot of this is down to the exposure. A lot of Michinoku Pro's fans wouldn't say that this is the best multi-man match in the company's history. Hell, they might not even say that it's their best one from 1996. There's another 10-man tag from December with mostly the same personnel, only with Tiger Mask 4 replaced by the Great Sasuke, that is often called the greatest match in the entire history of the company. The these days tag match is very similar in this regard to a bout that occurred 10 years later, when Dragon Gate stables Dull Fixer and Blood Generation faced off at ROH's Super Card of Honor. It wasn't exactly the first time the match had happened, and some could surely point out better examples of it on DG's own shows, but that junior action was utterly like nothing else at the time, in front of an audience that probably weren't too aware of the levels that Dragon Gate could go to, that it immediately became revered as one of the greatest matches in Ring of Honor's history. Just like this bout, it got the 5 stars from Big Dave, and as much as that rating sure as hell isn't everything, it's an indicator of the match's importance not just as a phenomenal contest, but as a gateway to so much more. That was true of the Dragon Gate tag, and it was also true of this legendary Michinoku Pro match. The only other question, perhaps, is just how well has the match held up? If you rate it purely on technical action and complexity of the spots, it may have been eclipsed over the years, whether it's the aforementioned Dragon Gate ROH match or others that have occurred more recently in companies like PWG, Lucha Underground or AEW. Is it still special? For me, it absolutely is. There's a little something about Kaientai DX in particular, a cohesiveness, a feeling of the group almost being of one mind like an ultra-cocky heel Megazord, not to mention the all-round greatness of folks like Yakashiji, Hamada and Delphine beyond the execution of spots, that keeps this match looking picture perfect all these years later. Still an absolute must-watch. So, it's main event time. And yeah, these two guys aren't exactly in an enviable position, having to follow that last match. It's like the closing tag bout at the Dream Slam all over again. Anyway, JINSEI is making his first Michinoku appearance in almost 2 years, having spent time as Hakushi in WWF, as well as making a little trip to New Japan. The silent and spiritual Shinzaki started off as a heel, but soon became a face and one of Empro's most popular acts. Tonight, he faces Hayabusa, one of the hottest acts in Puro. The equally mysterious masked Hayabusa is one of the wildest high flyers out there, and despite a series of injuries, something which would be a common theme, the latter half of 1996 sees him gradually taking the position of becoming the company ace of FMW. It's a little bit of a styles clash between Hayabusa's acrobatics and Shinzaki's more powerful game, although JINSEI is perfectly capable of flying around himself if need be. A couple of beautiful ring entrances later, we're about ready for this pairing to kick off. We get the typical main event feeling out process to start things off, as you might expect. It's a tetchy beginning, and a couple of minutes before Shinzaki hits the first aerial move with a Vader Bomb. However, Hayabusa is soon able to retaliate with a moonsault over Shinzaki, a kick to send him outside, and a big somersault plunger where he lands on his feet. That's the sort of thing he can do, and trying to match flips with H might not be the best idea. Shinzaki gets an opening on his return to the ring, catching Hayabusa's arm and doing one of his favourites, the prayer rope walk, in which he gets about halfway around the ring before hitting the flying chop. However, Hayabusa is able to hit a roundhouse kick from the apron and follows up with a springboard spinning heel kick, after which we get some groundwork. The action is, well, it's okay so far. The crowd are a bit quiet, understandably so. We're seeing a good few spots, although it's a kind of one after the other thing, without a whole lot of cohesiveness. The superior kicks of Hayabusa allow him to keep the advantage, and it's not long before another big dive, a triangle moonsault to the outside. Back inside, Hayabusa gets a 2 count from a standing moonsault and another kick from the second rope. Shinzaki just can't keep this fella grounded, it seems. A fisherman buster is followed up by Hayabusa's signature Firebird Splash for a near fall. At this stage we're about 10 minutes or so in, and it's still not bad. Again though, the crowd is not quite getting there with it. Is it a case of them being tired, or this not really feeling like a main event? It's just lacking that extra little something, if you know what I mean. It can sometimes take a bit of time for the pair to set up all of these spots, which doesn't help. Hayabusa hits the Falcon Arrow and goes to finish Shinzaki off with the incredible Phoenix Splash, but Shinzaki is able to move away and finally get back into the advantage. Hayabusa tries desperately to retaliate with a springboard, but jumps straight into a powerbomb. Shinzaki goes full on the attack with a top rope chop and flying shoulder tackle and gets a near fall with the praying powerbomb, but when he whips Hayabusa into the ropes, the Phoenix collapses with his knee. It does appear as though Hayabusa has suffered a legitimate injury, possibly from an awkward landing on the earlier Phoenix splash. With Hayabusa being thoroughly crocked, things get rather awkward, as you might imagine. Shinzaki takes him down, hits 3 headbutts off the top rope, and then finishes the match with a praying crucifix powerbomb. So yeah, that's the ending. It's clearly frustrating for Hayabusa, who punches his knee in anger. There's a show of respect at the end with Shinzaki helping Hayabusa to stand, while Great Sasuke also comes down. Sasuke challenges Hayabusa to a match in FMW at the end of the year and shakes the hand of Shinzaki before wrapping up the whole shebang on the microphone. So yeah, this isn't the best match, unfortunately. It had to follow a classic, of course, but these two just couldn't really get it together. The pace was that little bit too slow, they didn't have the best chemistry as opponents, and there was nothing to hand the various spots together with. The injury doesn't help, obviously. Perhaps things could have been helped or improved with a great back and forth finishing sequence, but Hayabusa's knee giving up on him just as Shinzaki was starting his comeback meant that they weren't able to do that. Fortunately, it wasn't a major injury. Hayabusa was actually back in an FMW ring days later, although it looks like he was only in multi-man bouts for the rest of the month. He had a few bad injuries in the first half of '96, and this might have been a recurrence. I don't necessarily think that this match is flat out terrible, it's just rather unfortunate, and not exactly the best way to finish the card. Still, it did result in one thing. Hayabusa and JINSEI Shinzaki, it turned out, were much better off as partners than they were opponents, and it wasn't too long after this that they'd start up a rock-solid tag team. Both of these guys would continue to be at the top of their respective promotions, of course. The very next year, Shinzaki would star in one of Empro's most high-concept storylines, in which, having died in a match against Great Muta in 1996, he gets resurrected as a zombie to face The Undertaker, with the Dead Man's appearance being a part of Empro and WWF's growing relationship. Shinzaki is one of the founders of Michinoku Pro, a 5-time tag team champion with the company, and while he can often be seen in other federations, Empro remains his home. Nowadays he's the company president and co-owner with Great Sasuke, while still being active in the ring. Hayabusa would continue to be the ace of FMW through the 90s, particularly thanks to feuds with Atsushi Onita and Mr. Ganosuke, although injuries would continue to take their toll. He remained faithful to the company as its star waned and depth took hold, but in October 2001 he suffered a broken neck in a match with Mammoth Sasaki that, sadly, left him paralysed. Despite this, Hayabusa would continue to be active in wrestling, working with companies, occasionally promoting, trying his hand at sinning, and making various appearances over the years. The moment in 2015 in particular, when he was able to walk to the ring unassisted for his official retirement ceremony is, well, yeah, that brings a tear to the eye. Sadly, Hayabusa, real name Eiji Ezaki, passed away in March of 2016 at the age of 47 due to a hemorrhage. Hayabusa's legacy is, of course, worthy of a video all of its own, but an untold amount of fans were probably introduced to pro-res by him, a great deal of wrestlers were influenced by him, and so many people were inspired by him. Long live the Phoenix. These days was, on the whole, a pretty damn excellent show. Michinoku Pro, the indie from the northeast, were not only able to pack out the sumo hall with 7,980 people in attendance, they were able to convert with a show that's well varied, fast paced and entertaining throughout. And of course, it features an all-time classic bout. Even if not everything on the show manages to hit fully, it's a lovely little watch and one that's highly recommended. And even if this was the commercial peak for Michinoku Pro Wrestling, it certainly had a big impact on them, and most of all, it had an impact for the guys in the 10-man tag match. The buzz around Michinoku Pro following that match was huge, and after these days, a lot of the guys would be in demand. Kaientai would have yet another notable six-man tag in April of 1997 against Sasuke, Hamada and Yakashiji, only this time it would be as part of the card for ECW's first pay-per-view, Barely Legal, even more exposure on the western stage, while the great Sasuke and Taka Michinoku would also wrestle a couple of matches for the WWF, including one at In Your House Canadian Stampede in July. Still, one upshot of all of this interest is that eventually companies are going to come sniffing around, and sure enough, M-Pro wrestlers would be signed up to go west. Taka Michinoku would be signed by WWF not long after his match with Sasuke. While reports differ as to whether WWF initially wanted Sasuke but a dispute meant they went with Taka, or if they always wanted Taka from the beginning, he was signed to be the linchpin of the WWF's revived light heavyweight division, which they created to try and compete with WCW's much healthier cruiserweight offering. Speaking of which, Shiryu would be signed by Ted Turner's Boys in early 1998, where he unmasked and wrestled under his real name, Kaz Hayashi, remaining there until the end of the company 3 years later. Dick Togo, Menz Teo and Shoichi Funaki would all join Taka for a WWF version of Kaientai in 98, and while Togo and Teo weren't there too long, Funaki would remain. And so, gradually, Kaientai DX fragmented and broke up. The end of Kaientai DX did largely signal the end of Michinoku Pro's most popular years, with other talents also departing the promotion, such as when Super Delphin left in 98 to form his own junior-based promotion, Osaka Pro, others jumping ship with him. Michinoku Pro did however get a bit of a spark in the late 90s and early 2000s. They had an agreement with Ultimo Dragon's Toryumon at the end of the millennium, which did see equally young and promising juniors like Shima and Suwa come in for some action, and they also hosted the third iteration of the Super J-Cup in 2000. Even if Michinoku Pro hasn't been all that relevant or well known for quite a long time, the company are still going. And indeed they're still much the same, running regularly in the northeast, with great Sasuke and JINSEI SHINZAKI both in charge and active. Sasuke even remained active throughout his brief political career in the 2000s, which Wikipedia best sums up by claiming that he was the world's first masked legislator. The Michinoku Dojo also tends to produce some hot talents. Kino, one of current Noah's hottest and best talents, is one of their best exports, trained by SHINZAKI. For all the ups and downs of the Puro world since the late 1990s, Michinoku Pro hasn't changed an awful lot at all, which most certainly deserves respect. And of course, the great Sasuke is, to quote Paul Simon, still crazy after all these years. Hopefully you've enjoyed this look back at a classic show, and until the next time, bye for now.